go ahead then and with our public hearing, open that up for our target market program ordinance. And actually, let's have staff first come up and just brief us on that, and then we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing after that.
Okay. Good morning. Chair Johnson, my name is Nuria Rivera-Vandermeid. I'm the Deputy City Coordinator for the City of Minneapolis, and I stand in front of you not in that capacity, but really as a representative of the larger supplier diversity team, many of which are behind me now. So I must have lost a coin toss somewhere, and here I am telling you a little bit about where we are. Today we want to talk to you a little bit and bring you an update on the Target Market Program, and before we go into that in depth, I wanted to just give a little bit of background on where that came from. In October of last year, we received a staff direction to look at a variety of ways in which we can increase contracting opportunities for particularly our small businesses, in a way we can simplify our own procurement processes, in a way that we can perhaps bring technology into the fray to assist businesses doing business in or contracting with the City of Minneapolis. And amongst large staff direction, we see before you a variety of issues. But in particular, today we're going to talk about item 1C, which talks about the Small Business Target Market Program. To give a little bit of additional context, and I promise I won't go through every single one of these slides, but I want to say that a lot of work, I want to honor a lot of the work that's been done by staff before me, or before this group even started. And a lot of this work has been done, a lot of advancements and improvements that have been done either in civil rights or in business licensing, in procurement within finance and property services have been done to review and simplify the RFP process, to try to unbundle more contracts, to provide some information and provide additional resources. Particularly, I mentioned our BTAP program within CPED, who's really been striving to provide technical resources to businesses as they move forward. So a lot of work has been done on that. Our supplier diversity team, which is really a cross-section, as you see behind me, of staff from a variety of offices, developed a 1 to 5 year plan, which we came before you and presented at the end of January of this year. And in that plan, one of the things, and you'll see some themes that emerged in the presentation before you, in that plan, we talked about a variety of topics we were going to look at, from disaggregating our data to doing a spend analysis to really reviewing our modules and trying to create a vendor portal that actually could be used both for external vendors but also by staff to try to match opportunities to vendors. And again, in those was the development of a target market program, which is really why we're here today. As we talked about the target market program, we wanted to also make sure that we were informed by businesses themselves. We know that oftentimes that we move forward in the city and we try to create new programs, but we perhaps are not informed by the people who are most impacted by the things that we do, and we really wanted to make sure that we did some outreach. We sent a mailing and we provided a survey to over 1,600 businesses, and BTAP was really instrumental in that particular endeavor. We did a focus group where we had tremendous attendance, and we were very happy to see Council Member Quincy join us for that focus group. We had around 60 people in attendance for that. And we also did we also talked about the Target Market Program in a variety of vendor fairs and other events. And so we tried to get the word out amongst businesses and say, what do you think about our ability to provide additional opportunities, again, specifically aimed at small businesses? And as we did that, we got a variety of respondents, and perhaps I didn't highlight this earlier. This is a small piece of a larger endeavor to expand contracting opportunities to a variety of businesses. Certainly, we have our SUBP program that is targeting women and minority-owned businesses that resides within civil rights, and they have done a lot of outreach and a lot of work in trying to expand that program. We as a team will continue to look at additional opportunities to speak to that as well and to try to assist or brainstorm additional opportunities that can be had here. Today, we're really talking about a race and gender neutral program But I say that as a misnomer almost, because when we know that race and gender neutral programs, if we do better by small businesses generally, we also do better by our small minority and women-owned businesses, because that's the space in which they occupy by and large. So as we talk about this, we send a survey out, we talked about some eligibility requirements of what this program would look like. We made clear that we wanted to make sure that this was a race and gender neutral program. And we heard a lot from businesses. We heard a variety of insights, and I share them with you. We heard that 31% of businesses had worked within the city within the last year, but frankly, 45% had never done business with the city. So a lot of opportunities there to perhaps attract new people to our city. We also saw, as we were looking at a variety of eligibility criteria and what that looks like in terms of gross receipts in particular, we had talked about starting with, you have to meet SBE requirements that come from the Small Business Administration, and those cutoffs were quite large. They had a cap of 23.98 million. And when we heard and what we see both in the survey before you and what we heard in the focus group, that those caps were way too high, that in our marketplace, we have a lot of small businesses that don't go anywhere near 23.98 million. And if you're really going to benefit people, we've got to think about those caps in a different way. So as you see here in the slide before you, we saw that the vast majority of respondents had gross receipts under 1 million, and 77% of respondents had less than 20 employees. So we know that we had to figure out how to adjust when we came before you in our proposed recommendations to make sure that we actually captured and did the best by our small businesses in our marketplace. The nice thing that we heard, that despite our initially kind of broad criteria, was that people were generally satisfied with what we saw, and 74% indicated that they were likely to participate in a target market program if the city were to push one forward. And so we were really excited to say that we were on the right track. So again, these are just some additional focus group insights. One of the things I want to highlight here is some general appreciation for can you make it simple? Whatever program you're going to do, can you simplify the process? Can you create some kind of reciprocity with something else that's going on in the city? And in particular, CERT came up because CERT is something that a variety of small businesses are already a part of, but there are also other certification programs that, again, where this is a race and gender neutral program, we've got a little bit more leeway than when there is potentially heightened scrutiny in other programs that have a race and gender component to them. We also talked a little bit about consideration to creating small business enterprise goals, and I think it's something that we're going to consider in the future. We didn't want to create artificial goals now at the start of a program. We want to take a look at that next year when we know what our baseline is. So we certainly heard that and want to make sure that we move forward on that when we come forward with an update in the next year as well. And again, the consideration about changing the gross receipt caps on size, that when you define size for small, to make sure that you consider what our marketplace is. We also had some parking lot issues beyond the target market program that we're really happy to say are already part of our consideration as part of our supplier diversity team, which are shortening a timeline for payment for small businesses. We know that businesses, particularly small ones, don't have that length of time in which to get paid. And so we want to think about ways in which we can accelerate that. Improving technology options comes invariably at anything we do in the city. How can we make it easier for vendors to submit their proposals? How can we make it easier for departments to match vendors to opportunities so they're not needing to go to the same well every single time? It's again about expanding those opportunities. So our proposal, as we come to you, is to create a target market program that allows for small businesses to have the ability to respond to city contracts up to $100,000, and that where we would have and how it would generally work is that where we would have a proposal out there and we have 3 or more respondents that meet those criteria, and I'll talk about that eligibility criteria in a moment, that they would be then set aside to be the only businesses or enterprises eligible to bid against those contracts. They would be on a level playing field, not perhaps competing against the larger companies that have other types of efficiencies that make that playing field a little less level for them. As we talk about the eligibility, I want to honor the fact that we heard our businesses, and we switched and we modified and revised some of our criteria to reflect that. So as we talk about eligibility, we talked initially about having that in our 11 metro area. We heard from folks that perhaps that can be expanded. CERT requires, or CERT encompasses the 13 metro area plus 2 Wisconsin counties. We decided not to use Wisconsin and really to keep it in Minnesota, and that would increase the principal place of business to the 13 counties you see here. We also obviously wanted to make sure that folks that are already and have gone through the process of qualifying as an SBE under the Small Business Administration, that we would honor that, and the way in which we would honor what we heard from businesses about making sure that those caps were well positioned to really pertain to their particular business was to really use the North American Industry Classification System industry codes, the NAICS codes, so that perhaps construction, where you obviously would expect a higher amount of money to be spent, would have a higher threshold than would, say, architecture or engineering firms that would have a 7 million or an 11 million or a 15 million threshold. So we want to honor that and make sure that our program mirrors that. The third bullet that you see here is in order to tie those two together, that staff would be looking to create a general industry category chart, which would be approved and published annually by the Chief Financial Officer. What we're really looking here is to take a look at the average annual gross receipts of the business over the previous 3 fiscal years, because we know that a business can have certain variations. One year they can be really terrific, another year that could wane, and so we wanted to make sure that we captured an average and that they do not exceed the amount specified in the general industry category code for that particular industry. So again, if we're going to issue an RFP for engineering services, that our cap isn't perhaps 20 million when the cap for that under SBA is 15, that we would take a look at what the average is. We are going to use a CERT database to make sure that we're accounting for that within our own marketplace and then setting a yearly cap on that. We want to make sure that we're actually responsive to how our market is changing in the future as well. And so we recommend that this annual category chart get reviewed and approved annually, published annually, so that it keeps in time with what our industry and our marketplace is seeing. We also wanted, we needed a way in which we could have folks register. We want to make a simple form to do that, and whether it's called self-certification or whether it's an affidavit, we will be creating a form in which folks can register as an SBE. Again, our goal here is not to ask about composition of ownership. We are not looking to see if the individual business is a minority or women-owned firm. We're just looking at size. We certainly, after the award of a contract, want to take a look at that because we should count all our diverse spend wherever that happens. But for purposes of awarding and being a participant in this target market program, we are really limited to looking at this in terms of size. We're also sensitive to the fact that we require a due process review, and we have put in the ordinance before you a right to an administrative review where if somebody is for some reason not eligible, and again it is based on size, or has been found that they are not the size that they did not comply with the requirements that we set forth, that we deny them entry into the target market program, that there's a reasonable way in which they can request a review, and we plan to use an administrative hearing officer and provide the due process that's required for that. So we built that into this ordinance as well. We propose a start date of January 1st, 2017, and that will really just allow staff, if this is approved, to start to put into place some of those additional components. There are some policy considerations that need to be put in here, the creation of the industry chart code. There are some tweaks to other places in our Minneapolis Code of Ordinance where it speaks to different thresholds, particularly where it has affirmative action plans required for contracts over $50,000. There's a need to now think about what that looks like for this program, because if it's going to be truly neutral, as our colleagues in civil rights have pointed out, then we've got to make sure that we adjust that elsewhere. And it will allow us to do some targeted outreach strategies so that we make sure that we can tell businesses that we hear you and we are open for business, that this is where we want you to come and this is where we want you to contract with. I wanted to include a little example of professional services and give you a sense of why we decided that $100,000 was a good cutoff for us. There have been some recommendations and some conversations within the group to raise that limit to $250,000, for example. We wanted to make sure we started with $100,000. And here's an impact example for professional services where the bulk, you'll see the bulk of contracts are really in that under $50,000 range, where we're already doing a variety of issues. The leap from 50 to 100,000 is 19 contracts, so it would not be huge. Whereas conversely, contracts for professional services for 2014 that were over $100,000 amounted to 206. And so that would have been a significant leap to change our program requirements for this. And that's one of the reasons we stuck it at $100,000. And finally, as I mentioned before, there's some additional tweaks that need to come forward to council as we talk about sort of tweaking some other places in the ordinance where we have to make accommodations for this program. We will certainly be coming to council to make sure that we do the appropriate actions. I would be remiss if I, in all this talking, didn't highlight the supplier diversity team, both listed and many of which are behind me. They were the ones who really did the hard work of doing some research, of really figuring out what makes sense, of identifying those areas either with regard to finance or with regard to civil rights and how that works with contract compliance, of really locating where those issues were to make sure that we had a simplified process, that we had an ease of process, and that we considered some of those outreach opportunities with our business throughout the city. And in particular, CPED was helpful in that endeavor as we move forward. So I stand for questions if you have any. I also say that staff smarter than I am on many of these issues are happy to step in as well.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate the presentation, and we'll save comments for after the public hearing. But if there are any questions at this time, not seeing any, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I'm not sure if we have anybody signed up. Looks like no. So if there's anyone here who has not signed up, please feel free to approach the microphone. Anyone? Anyone? All right, last call. We'll go ahead then and close the public hearing and open it up for comments. We have Council Member Quincy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased that this has been brought forward. This is obviously the ordinance introduction and amendments that have been authored by myself, Councilmember Glidden, and now Councilmember Warsami has signed on as a co-author to these packet of ordinance changes. It's a tremendous opportunity, and so I needed to acknowledge, I'm glad the supplier diversity team was pointed out on your last slide, so that way I don't have to say everybody's name. It's already been done, but it's been an extraordinary department-wide, enterprise-wide approach to something that could be what we're doing, folks, is really just a procurement system change. How we source products for the city of Minneapolis and how we do that really expanded besides just a finance property services kind of department proposal or policy change to something that went across the enterprise. And that's why civil rights had to be involved. That's why it was so important for having the economic development team at CPED involved, because we wanted Minneapolis companies to be participating in this process. We wanted them participating in and representing segments of the community that were frankly underserved by what we were purchasing over the years. So it's an exciting opportunity. It's part of our Business Made Simple programs. It's part of our economic development and BTAP and working with business associations, and it's a remarkable step forward, and I'm very pleased to have that work done. I did have one question, however, and one was maybe on the professional services side. The difference between the 100,000 and the 250,000 idea, how is that something that we wanted to maybe explore a little bit more?
I think it is certainly something, Chair Johnson, Councilmember Quincy, it is something that we have talked about. In fact, I believe it came originally from some of our representatives in civil rights to think about whether a target market program could come up to $250,000. We certainly want to take a look at that. We felt that at this time we wanted to make sure that we had, again, a baseline of what we're going. That part of this also is lined up with some of the spend analysis that we've been doing as well to make sure that we knew exactly what our spend is to make sure that we can make these decisions and determinations across the board. But it could be that in the future that we come to council and ask that we've seen the success of this program. We actually have reasons for why we want to expand that further.
Right. Well, I think it's a great step forward. It's nice to have that benchmark that we can work from and adapt and be flexible enough that we can always do that. I think to make this formalized, I'd be happy to move this action with the acknowledgement of all the work that Council Vice President Glidden has done on this for the past 5 years. We started working on this together last term, so it's been something that's been long in the works. I think it's going to make the city easier to operate. I think it's going to invite more people to participate, and as part of that, it will be saving the city money, and that's an important process that allows our departments to source more competitive ideas, new, fresh ideas, and make that database available so for more to participate in. So I'm happy to move this this amendment, or this new introduction, as appropriate. I am confused, though, whether this public hearing needed to be continued rather than closed. What was the procedural thing that needed to happen? Was there something else that needed to come forward at another calendar date?
I will refer to the city clerk. We know that we can move forward on this particular amendment. There will be additional amendments that come forward before this becomes official in January. There may be, with some of the additional amendments that need to take place, perhaps a notice of intent and an RCA that has to be issued. But
I imagine we'll be able to accommodate that from the legislative record, but I will be happy to move approval of this item.
Great, thank you. I do have a question on this. So maybe I missed it, but is there any way that we're prioritizing Minneapolis businesses over the 13 county businesses?
so that will be a discussion that we have, certainly, in terms of when we set up the criteria. But for right now, we really wanted to make sure that we take a look at it. There's been a conversation about whether it's a local preference or a best value preference. That has been discussions that we've been having and ongoing, and that may be something that we may bring to council as that moves forward.
Perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any other further comments, so I'll just say a few words on this. I want to thank our supplier diversity team for all the work on this, for the coordinator's office's work on this. I think it's just such an important policy change in ordinance. I remember when first taking office, I had a small business reach out to me. They're located in Northeast Minneapolis, and they said, you know, you put out this mailing contract, and there was only one bid back. We weren't even aware of it. We're a union shop. We're local. We can do cheaper prices. But then this big conglomerate came in, and they were aware of it and put in ultimately the only bid. So they wanted to know how can they do more to create jobs within Minneapolis by securing bids like this. And had conversations with folks. I think it, you know, funneled into all this great work being done by Council Vice President Glidden and Quincy and Warsami and the whole team to really bring this to fruition today. And I think it's just so smart to keep the money within the community and grow jobs here. And I just really want to thank you all on behalf of our small business community, because I know this is really meaningful work and just another one of the many initiatives that is currently happening within the city to make our city more friendly for our small business community. So thank you all very much. With that, we do have a motion on the floor from Council Member Quincy, not seeing any additional discussion. So all those in favor of passage of the ordinance amending Title II, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, all those abstain, the motion carries. Thank you very much. And with that,